Happy New Year. We're good? Okay. It's great to start a new year with you this morning, to know that God is with us. We've been very reminded about that in our songs this morning, and just so grateful that our God continues to serve and to help us as we serve. And it's just kind of God that He is. I was thinking this week of some certainties in life. Some things you can just count on to be true regardless of anything else. And really all the things that I think of at first are all things that the Bible tells us as well. Certainly we know that the Bible is true. That's a certainty. The good news of Jesus continues to save people even in this day and time. When people turn from God, the result will not be good. You know, that's a certainty. And certainly Jesus is going to come again. I know with each passing day, we're a day closer to the return of Christ. I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime, your lifetime. I have no idea. I'm not in charge of that timetable. Don't want to be. But certainly that is a true statement. It's a certainty. And we can bank on it, count on it. It's not going to be different. But then I thought of some less spiritual items. Like utility bills are going to continue to rise. I mean, that's just a certainty. I mean, I haven't seen them go the other way. It's always the increase. You hear about the increase. Okay, this year another 6% increase. And then they try to make it sound like it's going to be real small. But, you know, after you've had them for like 12 years in a row, it ends up being a lot of money. So that's a certainty. Another certainty, it's easier to gain weight than to lose it. I don't know if that's been a certainty in your life or not, but it certainly is in mine. It's also a certainty that grandchildren are your reward for not killing your children while they were young. And that is a certainty. So that is the sideline, you know, those kids you just could have strangled, you know, some points growing up. But, you know, they turn around, they give you a great grandchild. I mean, it's just part of it. It's a certainty. Benjamin Franklin wrote about a certainty in November 1789 when he said, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." Okay, I go along with that. Rudyard Kipling said, "A woman's guess is much more accurate than a man's certainty." Let me say that again. Some of you weren't listening real close. A woman's guess is much more accurate than a man's certainty. And I expect all the women to applaud and all the men to go, boo. No. You're, okay. I know you're afraid you got to go home together. Okay. Jason Offutt, I was reading this week in the Richmond News, and I picked a couple of certainties off of a list that he had created. And one of the things, I guess, I took as funny, but he said, no matter how good your window seat is on the airplane, a guy will sit next to you who smells of Doritos. I really don't know if that's ever been your experience or not on flight, you know, no matter how good your seat. And maybe some of you might like that. I don't know. Maybe it's good. You know, not me. Another certainty he put on there, you'll never win an argument with your wife. And he's obviously married, and that's just how it goes. But you know, last Friday we began a new year, and I'm sure you marked that as a lot of people did. Some of you probably celebrated like we did. Now, not all of you. I've already heard some of your stories, but, you know, typical New Year's Eve for us is we stay home. We stay awake until the countdown starts. And I realize some of you go to bed before you get to midnight because you've seen a new year before and it's no big deal, okay? You just go to bed. But, you know, for us, we stay up and we wait till, you know, the time that gets the countdown and the ball starts to drop in New York City. And, you know, and finally you get there and you kiss your loved one if they let you. Thankfully, my wife still lets me kiss her. Maybe you're like some people, you go out and bang pots and pans, or maybe you actually, like a lot of people in our neighborhood, you shoot fireworks on New Year's Eve and when the dawn of a new year, and then you take down the old calendars and you put up new ones and you go to bed. Boy, that's a monumental evening right there, isn't it? But you know, when you wake up the next morning, you know, where is your brain? You know, maybe you're thankful because you have a day off from work. You know, you get to stay home. It's kind of like a freebie, and maybe somewhere in that day you actually have some kind of a get-together plan, that you're going to get together with some friends or family, you're going to go out to dinner, or you're going to meet at somebody's house for food, and it's kind of a neat thing. But hopefully somewhere in that day, you find yourself thinking about this new year. And what does it really hold in store for you? I don't know where your brain is at that point if you actually took time to think this. I mean, maybe you're pretty excited about some of those things. Maybe you expect to make some wonderful memories with people that are special in your life. I mean, that has kind of been my experience for the last number of years, so, I kind of expect that to happen again. There's going to be some great memories that we're going to make this year in 2016, and so I look forward to that. Maybe you, like me, expect to make some new friends in this new year and have some new experiences, that you're going to meet somebody for the first time and you're going to become a friend and you're going to have a bond with them that you didn't have at the start of this year. And, when I look at all of you, you used to be a new friend to me at some point. And I with you. And hopefully that's been a blessing for you. It has been for me. But I look forward to adding and certainly new people becoming and new friends and people that I'm going to meet in other places that I associate, and I'm going to make some new friends, and I'm excited about that. Though I'm also excited about connecting with older friends, and that's a neat thing as well. There'll be some good things in this year that are going to happen I can't even foresee right now. You like me probably kind of look ahead and you kind of know what your job is and you kind of know what to expect in a general sense, and you can start plotting things on a calendar, like when you're going to have a vacation or when you're going to have a family get together, or some kind of mile markers in this year that you kind of celebrate, and you kind of anticipate those things, and you're excited as you look toward those things. But probably there's going to be something really, really good happening this year you really didn't expect at all. I don't know what it's going to be, but it'll be something. And to you, maybe that's kind of exciting. It is for me as I look ahead and think about how God is going to bless, and there are going to be some good things this year that I really can't even foresee today. But I know there's also going to be some things that are going to change me in a good way in this new year. Things that I wouldn't have selected, things I didn't choose, things at the moment I didn't think were good. But it's going to be a challenge to who I am as a man, as a minister, as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, a friend, whatever it's going to be. But there's going to be something that's going to really challenge me enough that it kind of rattles my life, and I need to make adjustments. And I readily see that, and I step into that. And I will be able to look back and say, that was a good thing for me. But at the time, it probably didn't seem that way. Maybe you have times like that too, but I anticipate that coming in the new year. I got things I'm excited about. I hope you do too. But if you're like me, you've got some real concerns as well. There's probably some people in your life that you're just not sure about their direction. And maybe they're your prodigal. And you look ahead in their lives and they're not making the good decisions. And you're very concerned about them. And it troubles you, and it brings some uncertainty to your life as you look ahead. I'm very concerned about people that are far from God in a time when biblical ignorance is so high. The value of human life as a special creation of God has lessened. Legal marijuana use is on the rise. God's teaching about gender identity and marriage is not authoritative to many. And when religious liberty keeps narrowing to the point that now it only covers what takes place in church buildings and synagogues about once a week. I mean, I see trends in our culture that to me are alarming. And it shakes the foundations of really who we are in this nation in a big way. I don't know about you, but do you find yourself giving thought to how bad the bad news will be this year? I mean, not trying to be downer or anything like that, but, there's things that happen each year that are horrible. And how bad will the bad things be this year? When I look back in the past year, there were some things that just jolt us as a people, but let's be honest, some things that jolted us at first don't jolt us as much anymore. And what is the next thing that's really going to grab us? And that concerns me. What's that going to be? How bad is it going to be? What precious people will you and I give up this year? special people that help shape your life, people that are part of your life fabric, people that you can't really imagine life without. Again, not trying to be morbid, not trying to think about a lot of bad stuff, but, that kind of adds some uncertainty to the mix of this year as we look at that. Will you or someone you love have a serious health issue this year? Will there be a scare that enters your life, a real threat to you that really rocks your world? What if you're going through something and the physician has tried everything that he knows or she knows, and they kind of say, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to do. I mean, how will you handle that if that comes? What if you need a job and you can't find one? Where will the next Islamic terrorist strike be, and how many are going to die because of that? Where's the next place where a bunch of school kids or people in a theater or people at work are going to be shot up for whatever the reason is? And I don't know, when you look at the world, what brings a sense of uncertainty to you, and you kind of see this slide and you wonder where it's going to end, and you're kind of afraid of where it's going to end, and you kind of are looking for something stable in the midst of a crazy and chaotic world where things just seem to be getting worse, and why are the bad guys winning, and and how you look at that, and just some of those things, you just wonder, where is this going to go, and what kind of world are our kids and our grandkids and maybe even our great-grandkids are going to grow up in? And how different is America going to be when we continue to forfeit the very foundational pieces that have made this country so great and wonderful and strong, and we continue to let those things go, and we don't realize how it's not only going to impact just us as Christian people, but how is it going to impact our society as a whole? Because a lot of things of who we are built around Christian principles and practices. And the more we move away from those, how is life going to go down in its quality in a lot of ways? There's just a lot of uncertainty amidst the joys and excitement I have in my mind, but there's some concerns and there's some uncertainty about things that I face, and perhaps you do too. And maybe the things I've mentioned aren't even yours. You got your own list. And it's already there in front of you. It's either shadowing you or it's just right in your path. And you're facing something that just really rocks your world. We begin a series today that I think God is certainly wanting us to grow from. And it's called He's Still Got the Whole World in His Hands. It's based on a series that Andy Stanley did at the North Point Church in Georgia years ago. But it's our hope and prayer that God and His Word will be your certainty in 2016. I didn't get my points in the bulletin this week, but I'm sharing 3 today. We'll put them on the screen for you. If you're a note taker, feel free to jot these down. But the first is the Bible has many stories of people in times of great uncertainty. The Bible has stories of people in times of great uncertainty. When I realize that's true, when I look at the Bible and realize that's true, I realize that we have a perfect place to go when brokenness and hopelessness stand right in our way. This is the perfect place to take all your concerns and your anxieties and to look at what God's Word has to say. Because the Bible isn't a record of God's people getting everything they want. It isn't like, all of a sudden you become a follower of Christ and you get rich and, you have kids and they're all perfect and then they grow up and they get in the best schools and you get to drive the nicest car. And it's all because you're just one of God's children and all these great things just happen to you. Your grandkids are wonderful and you got great neighbors and, nothing ever really goes bad and wrong for you. If it does, it's just temporary. It's going to get better in time. You read the Bible, that isn't the story that we're reading about God's people. Instead, we see people going through very uncertain, scary, lonely times. And even in the midst of all of that, finding a God who is certain. You know, in the Old Testament, we find the story of a teenage boy named Joseph. And if you had siblings growing up and you didn't really get along with your siblings, which is true of most all of us, you know, if you had a brother or sister or a flock of them, whether you were youngest on the ladder, in the middle, or at the top of the heap, wherever you happened to be, you had some sibling problems. There were probably those days when they were pushing your buttons because they knew what they were, and you were pushing their buttons because you know what they are, and you're just aggravating each other just for the sense of aggravating each other. And I've seen that from being a kid to being the parent and watching my kids do that. I mean, it just sometimes you just, you know, when you're brothers and sisters, you just like to choke them if you could get away with it, you know, but, you know, mom and dad would find out. But anyway, but, you know, it's just kind of hard to avoid sibling rivalries. But here's Joseph. Can you imagine finding yourself at the bottom of the well and your brothers are at the top, and this is the discussion they're having. Should we sell him or kill him? I mean, I don't know about you, but to be at the bottom of that well, and this is what your brothers are discussing, and you're helpless to do anything about it, I don't think that's a good feeling for you. I think it's begun to dawn on Joseph that these guys really hate me. They are intending harm for me. They could have decided to kill him. You know, it's certainly in the realm of possibility here, but they don't. They sell him to these strangers who happen by on their way to Egypt. And here's Joseph, who started out this journey to see his brothers home, you know, the favorite son, you know, a comfortable life. Dad takes care of him all the time. You know, he likes his life. He feels good about life. He feels good about himself. And here he is now on this caravan with people he doesn't know. And his brothers, of all people, have shipped him away. He feels hated. He can't believe this is happening to him. He doesn't know the languages of the people that are taking him, nor where he will end up. He's never felt more lonely and rejected in his life. He doesn't know if he'll ever see his dad again. He doesn't know if he'll ever go home. He doesn't know if he'll make it to Egypt. He doesn't know what kind of person's going to be watching him and guiding his life and telling him what to do. He doesn't know what he's going to be asked to do. He's being sold as a slave. I think there's times he wondered when he was going to wake up and find this has all been a horrible nightmare. But you know, even in the midst of how awful this time was for Joseph, and we can only imagine, God was in the middle of it. And God was still certain. In the Old Testament, we find the story of King David of Israel. He rose from the humble position of being a shepherd boy to becoming the king, and he was a mighty warrior, and God blessed him, and through the efforts of he and his army, they were able to bring peace into the entire kingdom and beyond. David had a beautiful number of wives and many children and grandchildren, and he had a great life. And God has already promised him that from his family tree would come the Messiah one day. And I'm sure at many points David felt pretty good about his life. But he's awakened one night to hear that his son has stolen the hearts of the people in the land, and he has amassed a huge army outside the capital city, and he is preparing to come in and overthrow his father's kingdom and place the crown upon his own head. You know, I think we've all had some trouble with our kids along the way, but none of them prepared an army and was ready to come in and throw us off the throne. Well, maybe some have. I don't know. Some snickering over here. But you know, there was never like anything like that. Your own son wants to kill you and reign in your place. And David is forced to flee Jerusalem to save his life, and he's not even sure he's going to make it. I mean, he's got children with him and women and possessions that are necessary, and they're trying to get out of the city as quickly as they can, has no idea if they're going to be overtaken and destroyed, and it was a real possibility. But you know, as uncertain as this time was for David, when we read through this Bible story, we know that God was there with David. In the New Testament, King Herod, in his jealousy of possible competitors, took the circulating story of a baby born in his kingdom that would grow up to be the Jewish king. And instead of searching for this one boy who was the threat to his kingdom, Herod decided to wipe out a whole generation of Jewish boys. And Herod sent out his soldiers, and they began to enter Bethlehem and the surrounding villages. And every little boy they found, they killed. Can you imagine being in the city, the town yourself, having a little boy, hearing they're coming, they're killing little boys, you're trying to hide yours, they're crying because they don't understand what's going on, they come in your home, they take your son, they kill him, and they leave you to grieve. What a horrible experience. And yet God was right there in the middle of all that. Not that he approved of it, but he was there. You know, every single story we read in the Bible where things just seem to be spinning out of control and all the momentum is going the wrong way and God seems to be absent and all the bad guys are winning. In the midst of all of that uncertainty, we learned that God is still God. And he's still working. It may not be the way we would choose, but he's working. And it's important for us to understand that because today there's a lot of horrible things going on. And we sometimes wonder where God is in the midst of those things. Has he gone on vacation? Why isn't he answering my prayer the way I'm praying it? I mean, what is going on here? But to realize that God is still God, and he still has the whole world in his hands. The second point in your outline today is the greatest moment of uncertainty in history was the night of a supper. The greatest moment of uncertainty in history was the night of a supper. In the New Testament, we know, and it's recorded for us in Mark chapter 14, and we're going to be reading some of that in just a moment, that Jesus was planning to celebrate the Passover with his disciples. And this is something they had done several times before. It was usually a great time of celebration and remembrance of what God had done for the Jewish people. And they're with Jesus. And you know, Jesus' ministry on those first several years was on this great upswing. He was doing miracles. And every place they went, the crowds grew larger and larger. And people were crowding in to be with him and to hear him teach and to watch him bring miracles and heal people that needed healing and restore things that people didn't have. And he was a celebrity. He was a Bible time celebrity in the New Testament during this period. And here they were on his right and left side, and they're soaking in the adulation that was being brought to Jesus, and they're enjoying it by association. And a lot of these Passovers were great times for them, but there was something very different about this Passover. Because as they walked into Jerusalem, things weren't going well. There were rumors circulating about the fact that Jesus was going to be arrested in this city, and they're wondering why they're even going to Jerusalem, if that's a possibility of happening. And that there's a lot of false accusations that are being prepared and are going to be lodged against Jesus, and he's going to be in big trouble with the government there, and they're going to be in trouble as well because they're his disciples. And there's a lot of fear and frustration as they head to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, and they wonder why they're even going. It seems like the wrong thing to do. And here Jesus, as they're going along, is talking to him about his death, that he's going to die. And his disciples are kind of looking at him like, Jesus, aren't you the Son of God? I mean, how do you die? I mean, this isn't possible. Why are you even talking to us about this? We don't want to hear this negativity. They don't understand this. And Jesus usually told them his Passover plans. I mean, when they were heading to Jerusalem, they knew exactly where they were going to gather, whose home it was going to be, and who of the disciples was going to help make preparations, and they all had their assignments. But on this particular Passover, Jesus has made all the arrangements secretly from them. And they don't know anything. They don't know where they're going. They don't know who's home. They don't know location. Nothing has been shared in advance. And for the common practice of what had been for several years was all different this year. And it adds to their uncertainty. And they sneak into Jerusalem when it's dark. There are no celebrations, no hosannas like there were when they showed up there on the Sunday before. I mean, it's not even been a whole week. And they're sneaking into Jerusalem. And if this wasn't enough, when they got in the room, Jesus began the conversation in a way that just rattled them all. In Mark chapter 14, beginning in verse 17, when evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12, and while they were reclining at the table eating, he said, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. One who is eating with me. I mean, these guys are already uncomfortable. This isn't the meal. This isn't the typical Passover meal. Yeah, they're all eating. Yeah, they're all doing the stuff they're supposed to do. But there's this real feeling of uneasiness and uncertainty of what is coming. And then Jesus says, hey, one of you sitting around here, you're going to betray me. You're going to turn me in to the authorities. One of you guys. Well, of course, Mark and all the gospel writers, they're all looking at each other, wondering who it is, and wondering if it could be them. But Jesus makes a point here when he says, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. This is Jesus' way of saying, this is doubly wrong. Because in the Jewish gatherings such as a meal like this, these were sacred events. When they gathered for a meal, it demonstrated that they had deep feelings and affinity for one another, and it was a bonding of kinship to one another and a special relationship because they had sat down to have a meal together. And Jesus said, not only is one of you going to betray me, but you're sitting with me right now around this table acting like nothing different is going on. But the strange uncertainties of that night continued. Beginning in verse 22, while they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, take it, this is my body. Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, and they all drank from it. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, he said to them. These guys had been taking the Passover since they were kids. They knew what each cup meant. They knew what each particle of the meal meant. And all of a sudden, here sitting at this table, Jesus says, scratch all of that. This bread represents now my body. And this cup represents my blood shed for you. I don't know how quickly you accept changes of a major nature, but most of us don't do very well. Most of us struggle with something that it's at large. And they didn't have any time to absorb this. I don't think they really even understood exactly what he was saying, but it's Jesus now changing the whole meaning of the Passover meal. And for guys that are already on edge, wondering what's going to happen, afraid of what's going to happen, uncertain of what's going to happen, wondering what's going to happen to Jesus, wondering what's going to happen to them, they're in Jerusalem, they're there in secret, and now he's telling them things that are upsetting the apple cart of their lives. And then he goes on to say that they're all going to fall away from him, even Peter. Even Peter. Oh yeah, Peter argues. You can read through Mark 14. He kind of rails against Jesus. Oh, they'll all run away from you, Lord. Not me. And Jesus said, yeah, you too, Peter. In fact, you're going to betray me 3 times. Can you sense a little of their uncertainty? In the midst of what you and I think of as uncertainty today, maybe in our families, in our jobs, among our children, our culture, and our leadership, and our government leaders, in our economy, and our retirement, and our own health. The question is, can you and I trust God and maintain faith in Him when there's no evidence of His activity in your life, in your culture, in your world? Can you still trust Him? Even when you can't see His hand working. Even when it looks like He's not working at all. Can you still trust Him? Can you still maintain your faith in Him? You know, if you were to ask the disciples what their darkest hours with Jesus were, I think they tell you it was this night. Because everything they thought they knew was up for grabs. They would say that those hours were some of the worst of their lives. That they felt hopeless. That Jesus was on this suicide mission and all of them were going down with Him. And some of them may have been wondering why they'd even chosen to follow Jesus. What exactly were they involved in? This wasn't what they signed up for. I think for them it was probably the darkest hours. Because the one in whom they had put their faith was telling them he was going to die and horrible things were going to happen. And they're like, no way. No. But I think if you also ask those disciples later, in their time with Jesus, when was God doing His greatest work? They would say it was in those same hours when it seemed like God was doing the least. Those same hours when it seemed like God was absent. Those same hours when He seemed least active. He was the most active because it was in those darkest hours that our salvation was born. Became possible. And you and I still look back and thank God for His goodness and His grace in those hours. Even though the disciples at that time were in a pit of despair, wondering what they had done and how they needed to move forward from there. Thirdly, God's methods are often hard to swallow. God's methods are often hard to swallow. You know, we have this in our minds, a sense of timing, don't we? You know, we kind of know when things need to be done, you know. If you're planning to surprise somebody with a nice gift, you kind of plot the course of how this is going to unfold, and you kind of get your own idea of perfect timing. And you try to make sure everything falls into place for that. Or you've got a neat trip planned for your kids, and, you know, when do you arrive there, and when are they most fresh? I mean, we've all got our own sense of what is good timing, what is terrible timing. And if you're like me, you've looked at some of the things that God has done, and you're like, I don't get your timing, God. I don't understand this. I mean, I expect you to show up like way back here somewhere, and now it's here. And sometimes God just shows up at the last minute to help you out, and you kind of wonder why He didn't show up way back over here. Or maybe it just seems like God isn't there at all. You know, you prayed, you've asked for this, you got past that moment and nothing happened, and you prayed for this moment and you got past it and nothing happened, and you sit there and you have trouble understanding God's timing. Are you like that? Or maybe you find God working in the midst of broken and barren and corrupted things, and you think God shouldn't even have a part in that. He's doing things in ways that you wouldn't have chosen if you were in His shoes. We wouldn't allow things to get as bad as they get before we step in and do something. You know, we just don't understand God's ways. We just don't. And of course, God told us, Isaiah 55, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. And we're like, I know. But you know, when you begin to look at the Bible, you see that the biggest things God does comes out of the biggest messes in whatever realm you look in. That's just what God does. And our salvation was birthed in a time of extraordinary darkness and uncertainty. And aren't you glad? I sure am. Life is uncertain, but God is not. Family may be uncertain. Economy may be uncertain. The world may be uncertain, but God is not uncertain. And knowing this, I think, helps us because it keeps us from making decisions that further complicate the difficulties that we're already in. We can make things so much worse when we launch out on our own to do things that we need to trust God to do sometimes. We're fixers, aren't we? And sometimes our timing is terrible. And all we do is make things worse. When you can trust the certainty of God, when you can be close to Him in the midst of the direness of your circumstances, trust His timing. And sometimes we can avoid some decisions that just make things worse. You and I need to understand, and we're going to be looking this over the next 2 weeks. It's just a really strong reminder, God still has the whole world in His hands. No matter how bad it looks, no matter how rotten some things are, no matter how the momentum seems to be swinging right now, God still says, trust me. Trust me. I want you to know this isn't some kind of pep talk series that we hope you walk away from and think, well, yeah, that's good. Because this isn't based on some success story of my life. Because your life is your life and my life is my life. And I can't really feel what you're exactly experiencing and you can't mine. This series is not based on that. This series is based on the Bible. A book that talks about uncertain times of God's people who learned that in their uncertainties, God could be trusted to be certain. And you and I need to trust Him not only with our salvation, but with our daily walk in Him. We're going to talk about that over the next couple of weeks. And let God's Spirit minister to you in your uncertainties. Let's pray. Father, this world is a mess in so many ways. But our lives are too. Maybe they don't seem as bad as the world, but I guess, Father, it depends on how much we're looking at your word, your mirror. And just as we trust you to work in us when we yield ourselves to you, we need to pray the same for our world. We need to strive to be a light for you in the darkness of this world, because there are people who just don't know you, Father. And they can't see you. And they've gotten bad information. And they've had bad experiences with a variety of things. Maybe people who were Christians. And Father, there's people that have distanced themselves from you. And your heart still reaches out to them, Father. Because your love for all people is so much greater than our own. Jesus came to save all people. His blood was meant to cover all sin. But dear God, you always give us a choice. And we just pray, Father, to be better representatives of you. And it only comes when we know you better and we submit our lives more to you. And truly we can become the light you want us to be. We're not in competition to see who can be the brightest light, or our light's brighter than somebody else's, and so we're good. But Father, we just want to be the brightest light we can be for you. With the people that you've surrounded us with and are looking to us, who may not always listen to our words, but Father, watch the way we live. So we want to trust you in the uncertainties of life. And sometimes the most rotten of circumstances. Because we can. Because you've proven faithful. Whether we see it or not. Help us to walk by faith and not by sight. In a greater way in this year. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. If you're ready today to make a commitment to Christ, or you'd like to talk to someone about it, there'll be several of us leaders in the back this morning. Happy to pray with you, something you're struggling with, or just talk to you about your relationship to God and where you are and a next step for you. If you're looking for a church family, you've already committed member of Christ's family, and you're just looking for a church home, we'd love to talk to you about that as well. Be happy to speak to you down front here or privately at a back table, and several of our leaders would do the same. And so I just want to invite you to do that today. We're going to stand together. We're going to worship. We're going to submit ourselves to God and be thankful for His word to us today as we sing.